Yeah. It's 1:01, so maybe Heather, we can let in the participants.
All right.
So good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. We're just waiting for everybody to get connected. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we have about 50 people connected so far, so maybe we should get started so we make sure we have time. So Celine, can I hand the floor to you?
Of course. Thank you very much, Miriam, and good afternoon to all. It's really my pleasure to welcome you, all participants, to this third webinar of the OECD platform on financing SMEs for sustainability. And I can see from the registration but already the participation that we have a very good turnaround, that many participants are connecting from different countries and different institutions, and this is very welcome. So for the newcomers, but also for as a general reminder, the OECD platform on financing SMEs for sustainability aims to promote knowledge sharing, policy dialogue, and data and analytical work on sustainable finance for SMEs among a range of actors in the SME financing ecosystem. As you may know, the work that is carried out in the framework of this platform contributes to the growing body of work on the topic of SME greening and green entrepreneurship that we are developing at the OECD, and in particular in the framework of the Committee on SME and Entrepreneurship. And just to give you, a flavor of that broader work that we're doing as part of the Committee on SME and Entrepreneurship, it includes, let's say, 3 pillars. One is the analytical work that we're doing, and which is being reflected here on the drivers, constraints, and policies for SME sustainable finance. And the platform is really the form we have to discuss that work. Second, we are also developing a strand of work that is looking at greening SMEs, and in particular developing a dashboard of SME greening indicators to provide country estimates of SMEs' carbon emissions and energy consumption, and support policymakers in their monitoring of progress made in greening SMEs. And the last pillar of that work is about work that we're doing on how to foster green entrepreneurship. So as you can see, your discussion today is fitting into a broader set of work, and is very important for us to get the good discussions going on today. So during its short life, because I think we are approaching the first anniversary of the platform launch, the platform has already achieved a number of good achievements or outputs. In particular, The platform work has informed the development of the 2022 updated G20 OECD high-level principles on SME financing, which now, thanks to this work, include a principle on strengthening sustainable finance for SMEs. So very good outcome from the platform and important principles that were recognized by G20 finance ministers and central bank governors back in July 2022. So good achievement there. What we're doing today, and more generally speaking, the series of webinars that we are organizing provides critical point in time to bring together different stakeholders to share state-of-the-art knowledge and discuss key issues around sustainable financing for SMEs. And just to give you a recap of what happened in the past webinars, the first webinar focused on understanding where SMEs stand on the journey to net zero. So it was very much a stock-taking exercise. The second webinar explored the different tools and approaches that public institutions are using to engage SMEs to undertake sustainable investments. And for this third webinar that we're having today, we are turning the focus on the specific financing instruments that can be mobilized to fund SME sustainable investments. So a very important discussion. And these instruments may be the traditional instruments that have been adapted to meet these green objectives, or there may be new innovative instruments such as sustainability-linked finance, whose conditions are dependent on the sustainability performance of the investee or the investment. So having a discussion on these two aspects, how to repurpose or retool the existing instruments and what new can be, leveraged, would be a very important part of this discussion. And for that, we're very happy and excited to have, I think we have someone probably with a mic on. If you can mute yourself. Thank you very much. And so, for this discussion, I think we're very lucky to have an outstanding panel of experts and an outstanding as well moderator for the discussion. And we will hear about different points, but I think this will evolve around three main areas. The first one is the types of instruments that financial institutions are using to finance SME sustainable investment. The second one is about how they have adapted existing instruments to fit the particular needs of SMEs when it comes to financing green. And the third is about the experience with the use of these instruments so far. And then, of course, we want to derive from that discussion lessons for the future and maybe identify what are the instruments with high potential that could support SME sustainability or sustainable investment in the future. And with that, I'm really delighted to hand over the floor to the moderator of the webinar, Mr. Justin Ham, who is the Deputy General Manager in the Economic Research Institute at the Industrial Bank of Korea. Justin, it's a pleasure to have you to moderate this session. And with that, I hand over the floor to you and look forward to the discussion of today. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Celine. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where everyone's connected from. Once again, my name is Justin Ham from Industrial Bank of Korea, a founding member of the OECD platform on financing SMEs with sustainability. It is my pleasure to be here today as a moderator, and also extremely delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. As Celine mentioned, we are going to be discussing various financial tools and instruments that are being utilized to assist and enhance SME sustainability. This topic is actually at the core of the platform's work because these tools and instruments are obviously very close and can be felt by the SMEs, and they are one of the few support measures that actually gets the job done at the end of the day. Also, there's no doubt that public financial institutions play a critical role in providing sustainable finance to SMEs by utilizing these tools and instruments. In that sense, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers today that can share their expertise and knowledge in this area. We certainly look forward to hearing from them, but before that, here are some reminders and announcements. As for the webinar, we'll have 3 12-minute blocks, each of them presenting a different perspective on today's topic. Also, there will be a Q&A session at the end, so if you have something to share or question about today's topic, please feel free to use the Q&A to send them over to us. With that said, I would like to pass the floor to each of our panelists to share their insights with us now. Today, we are delighted to have Shane McCollough of the Strategic Banking Corporation of Ireland, or the SBCI, Christian Dewberry from BPI France, and Adelaide Krakow of the European Investment Fund, or the EIF. As a start, it is my pleasure to introduce Shane McCollough, who is the Product Development Manager at the SBCI. The SBCI was established to offer low-cost credit to Irish SMEs while driving competition and innovation in the Irish finance market. The SBCI delivers its liquidity and risk-sharing schemes through partner lenders within the Irish market. Shane has a particular experience in the area of financial proposition and product design for the SMEs and agri-sectors in Ireland, and worked with all of the SBCI's stakeholders to deliver lending products for Irish SMEs and consumers. Shane has a specific focus on delivering SBCI's climate-related initiatives and represents the SBCI on a numerous working groups for the Energy Efficiency Financial Institutions Group. And this brings me to my question for Shane today. Well, to my knowledge, the SBCI is in process of implementing a new financing support scheme aimed at stimulating SMEs' energy efficiency investments in cooperation with the European Commission. Could you please tell us a little bit more about the objectives and modalities of this scheme and what you see as the critical success factors for designing and implementing financing support for SME sustainable investments? Shane, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thanks for the thorough introduction, and thanks to Miriam and team for the invitation to speak to you here today. I might just start sharing my screen here. Just very quickly, who is SBCI? And I think Justin's probably covered off quite a bit. We are Ireland's national promotional institution. We're owned by the Minister for Finance. And we're only in existence, we're not even 10 years in existence, we're only set up in 2014. And I suppose we have three key objectives in our mission. One is to bring down the price of borrowing for Irish SMEs. One is to increase access to finance for Irish SMEs, who probably lag behind their European counterparts, certainly. And also to increase competition in the Irish credit market. In terms of what we do, wholesale finance to our partner lenders. As Justin says, SBCI doesn't lend directly to SMEs, but we partner with bank and non-bank lenders in the Irish market. And traditionally, we've provided them with long-term wholesale finance. Now, the real crux of why I'm here to speak to you today is around risk sharing and how we have used risk sharing to really move the dial in SME lending. And I suppose a final arrow in our quiver is that we act as a service provider for government in terms of policy delivery. I'm very quickly going to go on some high-level figures, very, very quickly. And this is really just to show how critical a part of SBCI's overall business guarantees have become. So 3.2 billion of funding since 2014, which has helped almost 51,000 Irish SMEs. But the really interesting part of this, of that 3.2 billion, 1.9 billion of that is guarantees. And I suppose if I was to have this conversation with you 4 or 5 years ago, the vast majority of the lending probably would have been on the wholesale finance part. But we've now moved more towards guarantees. And that's really around trying to achieve what we want with market failures and trying to have more control to ensure that SMEs make the investments we want to support. So climate action generally for SBCI. Justin's talked about a specific scheme that we've recently launched to the market. And I suppose SBCI has kind of a three-pronged approach in terms of how it deals with SMEs under climate action. And one is the development of specific schemes. So that scheme that Justin mentioned is the Energy Efficiency Loan Scheme. And I'm going to take you through that in more detail, the kind of high level features, but really what is the value add? What are we learning to date, albeit it's early in its life? And what are the real kind of some of the operational aspects that need to be considered in delivering something like this on the ground? So in addition to specific schemes, SBCI also supports SMEs indirectly. So for example, we are currently working with our government to provide a loan guarantee scheme in support of homeowners and a national retrofit scheme. But a large part of the success of that scheme will be tied to the underlying SMEs that act as contractors and one-stop shops for that scheme. So while the end borrowers under this scheme will be consumers, there's a real capacity building angle for the SMEs. And these are the same contractors that will deliver energy efficient projects for other SMEs. And the final point, and one really not to be overlooked, is the overall supporting ecosystem. So we're talking about instruments today, and I'll highlight a lot of the benefits of guarantees in terms of facilitating and being a catalyst for SME sustainable investments. But guarantees are still only a small part of the overall ecosystem that is required. So we very much see SBCI's role as advocating on behalf of SMEs with stakeholders. So onto the energy efficiency loan scheme. Very quickly, it's a scheme to enable SMEs invest in energy efficient equipment. So your kind of typical heating and cooling equipment, LED lighting, solar PV installations, nothing too unusual. When we get onto the product features, you'll see the kind of loan sizes. So this is for relatively small size equipment. There's a maximum loan of 150,000. This isn't a scheme for huge complex investments. A key part of the scheme is that it provides 80% capped portfolio guarantee to participating lenders. And as we work through the challenges that we encountered, that we were fed back from our market research, our challenges from lenders, SMEs, and contractors and OEMs, we'll see how important the guarantee is. High level loan features, so it's between 10 and 150,000, so relatively small investments for SMEs, and we probably expect the average loan size, if it's anything akin to our other existing SME schemes, to be in the 40 to 60,000 euro range. Repayment terms of between 1 and 10 years. Again, we'll revisit this and see why this is important, why this is different, and why this is something that comes about as a result of the guarantee. Reduced interest rates. And the scheme includes loans, hire purchase, and asset finance products. So this is an introduction to the features of the scheme, but how did we get here? I'm going to now summarize the feedback that we got through our market engagement, which was probably roughly an 18-month process. So we engaged with policymakers, contractors, suppliers, and lenders. We also engage with SMEs, but as you would expect, they get a whole slide to themselves. So what did we hear back here in terms of the challenges? Policymakers noted that it's difficult to reach SMEs. SMEs are fragmented. We'll see why this is important. Climate action is top of the list for policymakers, particularly in the Department of Climate Action and the Environment that we frequently deal with. And this is a point also echoed by lenders. Contractors and suppliers note that access to finance is a key issue, and they note that the time lag between a customer approaching them, agreeing what piece of equipment they want to buy, and then being able to avail of the finance can be too long and can mean that the customer falls away and doesn't complete the purchase or the investment. Suppliers again echo the point around SMEs are fragmented and they're difficult to reach. Lenders have a lot of feedback. They want to be involved in energy efficiency. They're publicly stating their ESG ambitions. Shareholders are pushing them on this, but they're not sure what to do. And in the case of energy efficient assets, these don't typically provide the same quality of security, particularly for asset finance providers, as cars, as other equipment. A solar PV panel that's installed isn't readily recoverable by the lender, and secondary markets are not so readily available as they would be for more common standard assets. Lenders note that they're very, very keen to be involved in any climate action related measures, but the size of the market is unclear. What demand really is there from SMEs? Lenders did note that they have a track record in market creation. And this was in the auto finance sector, where vehicle leasing suddenly built a huge market for both SMEs and consumers. So banks did note that they have in the past managed to build a market. And there were other questions that we're familiar with in terms of information asymmetry. What does the taxonomy mean for SME lending? So they're just some of the challenges on the policy, lender and OEM side. But now to the SMEs themselves. We're busy. We don't have time to consider this. We don't know where to start. What's the roadmap for us? The payback on energy efficient investments is too long. It doesn't make sense for us. And this is one we'll look at in detail about how a guarantee can really help address this particular challenge.
Shane, excuse me, but we're not seeing your slides moving. I'm very sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you need to advance them or if we should help you with that.
Yeah, were you able to see any of them, Miriam?
It was now we see the SME one, but it was stuck for a while on the
okay, let's give it another 30 seconds and see if it works. If it doesn't, I might hand you control, Miriam, if that's okay.
Okay, right now we're seeing the one about the stakeholder engagement from SME.
That's the right place.
Okay.
And yeah, so in terms of SME feedback, SMEs have competing capital priorities. If the payback on an underlying energy efficient investment doesn't make sense vis-a-vis their other investments, then that investment doesn't happen. SMEs also note that lenders don't necessarily want to finance these kinds of investments. So now into what can the guarantee do? And this is, I suppose, I hope we might have some discussion on afterwards, but this is where we see the value of the guarantee in overcoming some of these challenges that we've called out. First of all, the security challenge. A capped guarantee can overcome that security challenge as the guarantee steps in and collateralizes the lender in place of the security. And it's interesting to note, in some schemes, we need to use an uncapped guarantee to allow the capital relief for particularly for main banks, for rated lenders. In this case, it's really the capped guarantee is adequate to overcome that security challenge. And SMEs seem to be less price sensitive in this sphere than in others, and are more concerned about access and timely access to finance. Credit appetite policy. Frequently, energy efficient assets are outside of banks' existing policies. The guarantee can help them to step in and I suppose on a pilot basis, try out this market and prove that there is demand there. And market creation is a point I'll come back to. As a promotional institution, this is a key part of our mandate, is to address market failures and to try and create a privately functioning market in due course. So this lowers the risk for lenders with the benefit of this portfolio guarantee. Now, a key point to address the business case for SMEs, and I mentioned the 1 to 10 year repayment terms under this scheme. That is unusual in the Irish context, particularly for asset finance, where typical terms are probably in the kind of 5-year space. There might be 6, 7 years in some cases, but 10 years is virtually unheard of. So the rationale for this is the guarantee allows these longer terms, but it reduces then the cash flow impact on the business. The repayment term better matches the underlying payback of the investment, which obviously varies massively from a short-term payback of an LED to a longer-term payback of a solar PV installation. But this should mean that the energy savings, particularly in our current environment, should largely approximate the loan repayments and therefore maintain free cash flow for the SME to make other investments. Again, the lower interest rate facilitated by the guarantee, given its risk reduction for the lender, shortens the payback. So for instance, on a solar PV project with a 10-year payback, every 1% reduction in the interest rate will knock 6 months off that payback period. And in practice, we're seeing rates of between 3 and 4% below market rate with the benefit of the guarantee. So I really can't emphasize enough how important it is to build the business case. A difficult point that many of us encounter is around the verification of green and trying to make this proportionate for SMEs. And I'll go through this quickly, but what we've done in this particular case is in order for the equipment to be eligible for a loan, it needs to be on our tax authority's database of energy efficient assets. So that's an easily searchable one for SMEs and for lenders. That's just a quick operational point. To close up, a guarantee doesn't solve everything. There are still other aspects that need to be dealt with. So the customer journey needs to avoid additional complexities over other loan journeys. And this is really all about normalizing green lending. Operational aspects in terms of data ask, eligibility checks needs to be proportionate to the SME population and to the investment size. The demand side has to be addressed, and this has numerous pillars. So distribution to SMEs is critical. One part that we do in this is that a number of the lenders in this scheme operate alongside vendors, quasi-vendor finance, to make that point of sale financing easier for SMEs. Promotion, we would note the requirement for a sectoral approach. And finally, we'll just call out the role of policy. So we work with the Grant Awarding Authority in Ireland. They provide vouchers for SMEs to have their energy audits. There's longer term surety provided by recent grant schemes and government announcements. And that overall certainty over the longer term for SMEs, I think, is a crucial part in this. And I will finish up there. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you, Shane. I think there was a small technical glitch with the presentation, but I think that was an excellent contents. So now we are ready to go to the next speaker, Christian Dewberry from BPI France. Well, Christian is the head of the European Affairs and International Relations at BPI France. He is in charge of collaborations with EU institutions such as EC, EIB, EIF, and supporting the bank's involvement in EU financing initiatives. Besides this, he is also the Eureka National Project Coordinator. His previous work experience also includes OSEO, innovation support activities, and the automotive industry. My question for Christian today is, BPI France provides a range of debt and non-debt instruments to support SME sustainable transition. Could you please tell us more about these instruments? What are the main distinguishing factors of the sustainability targeted instruments? Especially, how do they differ from the traditional products BPI France offers for SMEs? Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be with you, and thank you to OECD for the kind invitation. I don't know if you can see my presentation now.
Yeah, we can see.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I will present our climate roadmap with the various product and approaches we do deliver and our objectives. So a few words about us. So we are a company that is merging several public sector activities towards the economy and the companies, a credit institution, a guarantee institution, an innovation agency, export credit agency as well, plus an equity investor. And we have recently introduced some non-financial support services that we name coaching for entrepreneurs. So this is a range of activities that are really close to the companies with our 50 local offices across the territory. So the relationship between BPI France and the climate transition is starting at the beginning of the birth of BPI France, since the law creating the bank says that one of BPI France's fundamental mission is to support the implementation of the ecological and the energy transition. That was in 2013. Then we started to deploy ecological and energy transition plan since 2014, and we have delivered, provided 12 billion in financing and across other products to the economy from 2013 to 2019. So it means we didn't do nothing before 2019, but in 2019 we wanted to do more, to be more ambitious, and this is why we introduced a climate roadmap. And so I will briefly present where it is now. Of course, this roadmap has been impacted by recent developments, such as the war in Ukraine, with the rise in energy costs and the difficulties in the supply chain. We also identify, like most of you, the risks of a disjoint transition with the need to adapt to new regulatory requirements for companies, the loss of market shares and customers, higher costs as well, plus a challenge of industrial sovereignty that has been brought up by the COVID crisis. We made an inquiry amongst our clients, and we saw that 80% of CEOs are aware of the climate change and that they need to react and respond to it. But only a small part turns it into action, with three main obstacles: the lack of financial resources, the absence of adequate technology, and the lack of customer recognition at this point. So we feel that support is needed, involving multiple stakeholders and funding schemes. This is what has driven a bit our approach, with two focus in our roadmap. The first one being to align all our activities and clients with the carbon neutrality goals of Paris Agreement. And the second being to deploy product and support initiative that towards companies that promote the ecological and energy transition, with a target of 35 billion euros in green financing by the end of 2025. Meaning from 2020, it's not annual, of course, it's 2020 to 2025, 35 billion euros. We see our main target groups made of three different companies types. The first one being the group of companies that we need to help to transform and go greener through a dedicated financial and non-financial solutions. Second pillar is the increase in the funding of renewable energy in order to contribute to the growth of the companies active in the sector. And the third one is to support the emergence of technology providers and the green techs. Apart from that, we have identified some quantitative objectives in all our business lines. First, for instance, export financing. We want to do 600 million euro per year in 2024. In innovation, in investment, in support for renewable energy, and also in business support with 1,000 companies being supported non-financially in 4 years. So this plan touches all our business lines, as you can see. We have also some horizontal objectives and approaches. One is to monitor our portfolios of clients in terms of carbon metrics. The second one being to better assess and deal with climate risks, limiting the financial impacts, preparing the future regulatory requirements, which are very sometimes seen as complex. And the third point would be to increase our catalytic role, both at EU level by contributing to the debate, mobilizing financial resources, and so on, building partnership with local stakeholders like the regions and other public entities, chambers of commerce, and so on, and agencies. And align also on the ground with commercial banks in terms of indicators and practices. And the last horizontal objectives is targeting the internal space of BPI France with training for employees and processes that bring us to a greener position. In terms of now, I will focus briefly on three types of product to addressing those three groups of companies I mentioned. We have a brick dedicated to green tech, made of grants and calls for proposals or repayable advances to develop new technologies. This is made under a state budget normally, in majority, I would say, for individual or collaborative R&D projects. We have also agreement with the regions for that. In terms of the second brick is made of a green debt product with an unsecured loan. Also, we have introduced leaseback tools for the renewal of assets, real estates, and vehicles, greenery vehicles. And we are targeting especially SMEs from the biogas sector and other emerging sectors such as agrivoltaic, offshore wind power, floating solar storage, and green network. We are working on an additional program in the form of a guarantee, green guarantee program. It's almost packaged, but it's not yet released. And finally, in terms of debt products, we are also mobilizing our existing instruments towards the transition. So both dedicated instruments and non-dedicated ones. Regarding equity, we are addressing the VC space with our eco-technology fund, and also through our partners fund that we invest in through our fund of fund activity. We have also some growth capital vehicles like France Énergie Environnement, Wood and Eco Material Fund, and others. And we do a lot of efforts through our fund of fund division to focus on green tech. Finally, in terms of export finance, we have introduced a climate bonus for companies willing to reduce their impact on the environment through international activities, including renewable energy developers. And yeah, I think that's it for the financial product. And to end with the product, we have also a set of advisory services online or through a consultant that we pay partly. Yeah, that's a set of quite rich set of actions we have on the non-financial segment, including a lot of content online that we want to make available to SMEs notably. Some metrics now where we are in 2022, we expect to deliver to provide 16 billion euro of green financing by the end of 2022. The objective being 35 end of 2025. So I think we are on track on this. We have made 700 consulting missions called EcoFlux, which aims at reducing the consumption of energy and water by companies, and the average saving is 48k euro per year for the SME clients. And finally, we have launched a club of company called Coq Vert. It means a green rooster in French. The idea, the objective of this club is to gather SMEs and mid-caps engaged, committed to engage themselves in the climate transition. Yeah, that's a non-financial action we have to. Yeah, so that's a brief summary and update on where we are on the climate transition at BPI France now, and really happy to share with you and to also learn what other countries are doing, because it's key for us to be inspired by others and practices.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Christian. So I think we are. Is there a problem?
I have to stop my sharing my screen. Okay, it's okay. Thank you. Great.
Okay. So I think we are ready for our last speaker, who is Adelaide Krakow from the European Investment Fund. Adelaide is the head of climate and environment impact within the venture capital division of the EIF. Prior to joining the EIF, Adelaide managed Finavis seed capital funds supporting startups and entrepreneurs from the digital technology, healthcare, and clean tech industries, and also held management positions in Mixed Africa, a pan-African social housing company, and Clearfield International, a global corporate finance firm. My question for Adelaide today is, alongside credit, the provision of venture capital and other forms of non-debt financing is critical for the development of green entrepreneurship and eco-innovation that can bring green solutions to market for small and large firms alike. In this light, how does the EIF working with private partners support small businesses and entrepreneurs in accessing venture capital financing? What lessons have previous experiences taught your institution about the ingredients for success of these investments? The floor is yours, Adelaide.
Thanks very much, Justin. Could I ask Miriam to put up the presentation I provided? Thanks a lot. So moving to the next slide.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So again, good afternoon and very pleased to be with you today. For those of you that may be less familiar with our activities, the EIF is a European public institution, part of the European Investment Bank Group. Our primary mission is to provide access to financing to European companies and ventures. We do so through an intermediated model by partnering with financial intermediaries such as venture capital and private equity funds, as well as banks and financial institutions that really have that necessary proximity to market to identify innovative and high growth companies and support them with value add expertise in addition to capital. So we don't provide direct financing to SMEs ourselves, but rather channel it through our, to the target beneficiaries through our partners. And obviously at the same time, pursuing our policy objectives and goals. We have two main lines of business, our guarantees activities that facilitate lending to SMEs through risk-sharing mechanisms with banks, and also our fund-of-fund investment activities into venture capital and private equity funds, which then provide financing to SMEs, mainly through equity and quasi-equity instruments. So to date, and over the last 25 years, we've committed 35 billion euros to over 1,100 venture capital and private equity funds across Europe. And these in turn have channeled our resources and that of other investors, of course, to tens of thousands of European enterprises to further their development and growth. Given our history in the European fund industry and strong climate environmental policy objectives, the EIF has already, of course, been an early and active supporter of the European clean tech market, facilitating access to risk capital, which I will speak to in the next slides, focusing on venture capital for innovation in early stage companies. Before moving on, though, I wanted to quickly, give some context to the importance of risk capital in driving climate action, environmental sustainability. And thank you for, yes, we can move to the next slide. So as we all know, we're really facing an unprecedented global climate environmental emergency. Our economic and industrial development to date, hasn't taken into account the need for sustainability, which of course, has resulted in climate environmental degradation and the depletion of natural resources, which now pose real business risks and even existential threats. Not all is dire, however, and there is a growing awareness amongst all stakeholders, including ourselves, that change is needed and can be effected to redress the situation. Every sector of the economy needs to transform, and companies are under increasing pressure to revise their business models, innovate, integrate, and acquire new technologies and businesses that can reduce their climate and environmental footprint. So as whereas, 20 years ago, business investments geared towards sustainability were oftentimes viewed as a nice to have, they are now a must have if a company really wishes to ensure its long-term viability and thrive. We know that addressing, the challenges posed by climate change and environmental degradation will necessitate both the development of game-changing new technologies that are required for the future, as well as the scaling of existing products and solutions that can be deployed as of tomorrow. So against this backdrop, investment is set to accelerate, and risk capital and significant amounts of it will be critical in bringing about the innovation and level of transformation required. Moving to the next slide. So in order to respond to this need, EIF has been and continues to be amongst the most active fund-of-fund investors in climate environment in Europe. We've also been one of the most consistent as we've supported the sector since its beginnings, so the first clean tech wave in the 2000s and through its various cycles of development. Excluding our infrastructure and private equity fund investments, we've channeled to date over 1 billion euros to climate environmental VC funds, supporting new investment teams and themes, and also helping to catalyze a further 3.4 billion euros from third-party investors. In line with the development of the market and our own activity and policy goals, what we understand as climate action environmental sustainability has evolved over the past years. As we all know, it really isn't a sector or industry in itself, but rather an aggregation of overlapping verticals and themes, which have high climate environmental impact and value. As such, what the activities and technologies, products and services that we consider fall under climate environment is quite broad and covers, from energy, transport, and mobility to agri-food tech, circularity, and waste management, to name a few. We're really active across the funding continuum, from proof of concept to growth and expansion capital. And because we seek, of course, to participate in the financing and development of early stage innovation, which has strong upside potential and impact, through, of course, to the commercialization and expansion of companies with proven products and technologies. Given our mandate, we have a clear European focus. I think it's undeniable. And currently, over 75% of our fund commitments are earmarked for investment into Europe. Actually, we have clear guidelines by which we only invest into those funds that reach or will invest a minimum level of capital into European-based companies. One important point also worth highlighting is the fact that we embed impact in all of our fund investments. In the context of our impact investing activities, we've been one of the early promoters of impact measurement. We've developed our own methodology and framework that we are now systematically rolling out to the climate and environmental funds that we work with. Beyond reporting, this framework requires the definition and establishment of relevant KPIs and targets at the portfolio company level, as well as the fund level, which are then tracked to measure impact achievement. In addition then to financial returns, our fund managers' economic incentives are also linked to impact performance, which of course serves to reinforce the impact mission of the funds and the economic alignment between the fund managers and LPs such as ourselves. Our activities in climate environment must also be considered within the broader context of our group's role in driving climate environmental policy and investment in Europe. As part of the EIB group, we have contributed to the design of the EU taxonomy and, of course, sustainable finance regulations. We're also a core implementing partner and investment pillar of the European Green Deal and InvestEU programs. As you probably well know, the EIB group has furthermore positioned itself as the Climate Bank of Europe. And as a result, we've also devised a roadmap whereby 50% of our financing activities will be directed to climate action and environmental sustainability by 2025. So as a consequence, our investment volumes in climate and environment are really set to grow exponentially in the coming years. Before sharing our objectives and goals in this area over the next few years, I thought it would be worth pausing to take a look at the current status of the climate and environmental venture capital and private equity market. If we could move to the next slide. Thank you. So generally speaking, the climate and environmental VC/PE market is highly underdeveloped. And this is true across themes, sectors, stages of company development, and geographies. So a first wave of clean tech investors appeared on the market in the 2000s. For a number of reasons, these first investors unfortunately fared poorly. The market was still largely immature and ill-fitted then for the VC private equity model. Technologies were still in early stages of development, costly, difficult to scale. Investors lacked experience, and there was also a general lack of corporate interest in ensuring business development and exit opportunities for these ventures and companies. As a consequence, few of these early, VC investors survived, and the climate and environmental investor landscape has until very recently remained quite sparse and dire, which of course has limited the availability of capital for green SMEs. We are, however, thankfully seeing a new generation of VC/PE investors emerge on a market, which, as we saw earlier, is ready and ripe for investment and driven by the climate and environmental emergency, as well as long-term fundamental trends. Many of the teams are spinning out of existing, VC/PE firms, corporate VCs, or industry operators, and as such, they really bring relevant skill sets and experience to the ecosystem. We're particularly pleased to see that, we have teams coming together which bring, again, that tandem of investment and industry experience that we think is quite relevant. The first wave of clean tech funds were more generalist in scope, and there is also now a shift towards more specialized funds and managers by vertical, which we think is positive. I mean, this trend is really contributing to build up a specialized VC ecosystem of managers along, strategic themes and areas that can provide relevant sector expertise and value add to entrepreneurs and companies, of course. And this, in addition to capital, is particularly important in early stages of development and, of course, highly regulated sectors. We're also gradually seeing more generalist VC tech and PE investors showing interest in sustainability as one amongst other investment themes they may be looking at. And this, too, is helping to bolster capital availability, particularly in later stages of company growth. So although all verticals, moving now more to sectors, although all verticals are presently characterized by a limited number of investors, certain sectors such as agri-food tech, energy, or mobility, for example, are showing more activity and are a bit more dynamic with an increasing number of funds having been raised over the last couple of years. Other strategic verticals such as water or the blue economy are still very embryonic and quite niche, and as a consequence, required reinforced support from public institutions and ourselves. And I think this is particularly important because we do want to make sure that we direct, capital, to these strategic areas. In terms of stages of development, the funding gap really affects the whole value chain, from early stage innovation to companies seeking financing for growth and expansion. This notwithstanding, the limited capital that is available tends to be highly concentrated either at early stages of company development or, on the contrary, at company expansion once any technology or market risk have been eliminated. And so in this regard, certain segments or types of technologies are particularly underserved despite their high potential in terms of positive climate and environmental impact. This would notably be the case of companies that require product or industrial scaling, or are focusing on deep tech hardware, industrial or infrastructure tech investments and solutions, where capital intensity tends to be higher and the risk return profile may be less attractive for investors. Although the fundraising environment generally is improving, fund sizes overall, in our view, continue to remain suboptimal, which of course, limits the overall availability of capital for, fund managers to adequately support their portfolio companies, through their different stages of development, and really give them the capital runway that they need in the absence of more, syndicate partners and co-investors as the ecosystem develops. Finally, in terms of geographic scope, most funds are multi-country, pan-European or global. As we know, climate environment is global by definition and doesn't really know borders. In consonance, though, with the relative maturity of their venture capital and private equity markets, the majority of sustainable fund initiatives that we're seeing are coming out of Western Europe, although we are progressively receiving an increasing number of proposals also from other geographies within Europe. Finally, and as this is probably a very current topic and certainly relevant to this working group, I also wanted to touch upon the state of implementation of impact and regulatory frameworks in the fund industry. I might start by saying that impact used to be a bad word in the venture capital and private equity industry, but is now quickly becoming a buzzword, which is leading to some confusion and a bit of a loss of substance and meaning. There isn't really a harmonized understanding of what impact investing is. And for marketing purposes, many funds are using it indiscriminately, to cover investments in companies that are seeking to slightly enhance their ESG policies, so really just meet the minimum bar. But also, strategies that, on the contrary, are actively pursuing impact-driven enterprises that really seek to resolve a climate, environmental, or social problem. This lack of harmonization also extends to impact measurement and reporting. And although we view, the general increased and wider adoption of impact measurement as being extremely positive, not all of the approaches, promoted have, of course, the same level of rigor. Whilst the new SFDR regulatory framework is a major and certainly a welcome step in addressing these issues, and it is promoting a common framework for sustainable investing, we do perceive that many fund managers in the market that would potentially qualify as Article 9 impact funds based on their investment strategy are, unprepared or hesitant to file under Article 9. For many, it's really, the associated cost and burden of the reporting and disclosure obligations, which can be quite significant and onerous, for small fund managers and their underlying companies, particularly those in early stages of development. And these fund managers, as well as their companies, of course, have limited financial and human resources, to address some of the reporting obligations. Some VC fund managers have also expressed their concern that the criteria and activities, currently outlined under the EU taxonomy, which, is under development, may not be fully adapted to innovation or early stage companies, or, doesn't presently cover, certain activities that these managers would consider relevant and which would potentially leave, these companies out of the definition of sustainable investments and subsequently hinder or reduce their access to, financing despite their high potential positive impact. So these are just a few of the challenges that we're seeing in this area. So moving to the next slide. So given this landscape, we have established a number of strategic objectives for our intervention in the climate environmental impact VC market over the next few years. One of our immediate goals is to significantly ramp up our investment activity in order, of course, to increase the availability and deployment of capital. We can, expect to commit at least 2 billion euros by 2025 in climate and environmental VC funds, which in turn should be able to mobilize an additional, 8 billion euros that will be channeled again to eligible startups and enterprises. In order to meet this target, we of course benefit from the support of new mandates and investment programs from our stakeholders, such as the European Commission, the EIB, and national governments, which have specifically earmarked resources for investment in climate action and environmental sustainability. These include the new InvestEU program that has clearly defined climate and environmental solutions. That was one of its strategic policy goals, with a number of target areas to be covered. The InvestEU program also has a dedicated and ring-fenced pool of resources for investment into funds active into the blue economy, which, as we mentioned earlier, has really hitherto been neglected and quite a niche market for VC and PE funds. We also have a new mandate geared towards accelerating the scale-up and growth of European enterprises, which is Scale Up Europe, as well as an IPO window under InvestEU, both of which are meant to address, the general growth funding gap in the European venture capital market. Alongside, of course, our investment objectives, we're also, seeking to build, a well-functioning European climate and environmental VC PE ecosystem, which, as we, mentioned earlier, is still, under development. We want it to be able to, stand on its own, subsist over the long term and have, the sufficient breadth and depth to support European SMEs in different strategic policy areas, geographies, and of course, through all stages of development. As a consequence, we expect to have an enhanced role as anchor investors in the funds that we participate in, supporting, again, new and emerging teams, because the landscape, has to be further developed, and there aren't many established, investors out there. And making also strong and meaningful commitments to the funds that we back to really assist in their materialization, make them happen, and launch them. In our capacity as market builders, we'll also be, providing, as we've done in the past, a lot of structuring input to these fund managers in order to instill best market practices and really lay the foundations for future fund generations. Last but not least, we're really striving to maximize the impact of the underlying companies supported, not only by providing them, with adequate, capital for development and growth, but also, again, by introducing impact measurement in all of our funds and aligning fund managers' economic incentives with impact achievement and performance. We, of course, in turn, will report on our climate and environmental, investment targets and performance to our own stakeholders. And we've devised, the Climate Action Environmental Sustainability Framework together with EIB to be applied to our intermediated activities and track our investments in the field. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope I provided you with some insights on our activities and how we are seeking to make more equity risk financing available to SMEs in climate and environment. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Adelaide, and other speakers as well for the presentation and insights today. That concludes our speaker presentations, and I think it was very interesting to see what tools and instruments public financial institutions, especially the ones in the EU region, are utilizing to assist the SMEs on their sustainability journey. Compared to the conditions in Korea, I found many similarities, especially in the guarantee schemes towards the SMEs and efforts by both the public and private financial institutions in proactively providing advisory services towards the SMEs, which I thought were quite interesting. Now I would like to open up the floor for questions and answers from the audience. Please use the chat to send your questions in.
You can also raise your hand with the hand raising function if you would prefer. Justin, I see we have one question from a colleague, Marco Marchesi.
Yes, thank you.
I don't see, yeah, okay.
Okay,
go ahead.
Well, thank you, Justin and Miriam. No, very interesting presentation. So maybe I have a first question which would be the same for all the three speakers, and in particular the two from France and Ireland, which is about the profile of the SME clients, if you wish, in terms of I mean, the sector, the sort of size, the age of the company, maybe even the profile of the business owner. So if people interested into these products are more younger entrepreneurs or just the sort of covered entrepreneurs, and also, again, as I said before, if there is any strong profiling that emerged in terms of sector and size. So that would be the same question for the three of you, and maybe I will stop there for now, and then eventually I can come up with another question, but this already can take a bit of time, so I will stop here for now.
I can start if you want, and that's a very, very interesting question. I think there are in our case, we are trying to target very distinct target groups. In fact, for green tech, technology providers are mostly young companies, startups, innovative SMEs developing new technologies, and we try to support them through grants and equity for bringing the technologies on the market. On the side of the wider group is the group of all the companies, including manufacturing companies, that need to go greener. And this is more difficult to address, in fact, because it's a very diverse group from large companies to mid caps to SMEs. Of course, we concentrate on SMEs and mid caps, and there, I think our direct products like lending or leasing, etc., will address a core of this population, but not the smallest entities. And this is why we are working on a complementary product in the form of a guarantee that will be provided through the banks, in fact, and will be incentivizing the companies or helping them access to finance for green investment, and also incentivize the banks to go in that direction. Regarding renewable energy, I think I'm not a real expert of the sector, but I think in France must be a group of various size of companies, but like Green Tech, they form a well-known group to us, in fact. So it's easier to handle than the wider group of companies of all sectors.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Christian. I might jump in there quickly. Marco, I'm afraid I don't have a lot to add, just given the age of our energy efficiency scheme. We don't have adequate data to be able to stand over. So what I say now is probably more qualitative and reflects the discussions that we've had. So we've had a lot of engagement, as you might expect, from the agri sector, particularly around renewables. We've had a lot of engagement from the hospitality sector as they kind of understand their kind of fixed cost base. Our scheme, given the kind of maximum loan size of 150,000 and the fact that it is backed up by a guarantee, it should be available to early stage companies as well. But as I say, we've no indication at this point who the most likely cohort are that will participate there.
And just to finish on my end, obviously we're working with fund managers that really are meant to cover the full funding continuum. So both venture capital managers that are looking at investing and backing very early stage companies at seed stage or even proof of concept, up through expansion capital. So that would be more private equity. We also have an infrastructure fund of fund investment activity. So alongside the financing of SMEs, we're also actively financing sustainable infrastructure funds and projects, of course. But yes, what we are very cognizant of, again, is our market building role. So when we decide to back a fund, we look at it within the wider market context, try to see what sort of funding gaps it's addressing, and how it would be additive, to the ecosystem, and how our capital ultimately will have a strong impact and value add.
Well, thank you for the answers. I think we have a question from the audience. I think we have Mr. Gerhard Kummer.
Thank you, Justin. I'm Gerhard Huemer from SME United, the European SME Association. And I would like to have I would like to echo what Jean and Christian has said, namely that for the majority of SMEs, which are they have to catch up with the sustainability investments. What we see is what you have also said, that they are saying we need the money for something else. We have not enough experience, etc., etc. That many schemes we are following say, if you are not combined additional financing with enough advisory services, it will not be taken by the markets. And now the question is on these advisory services. Are you able to provide this advisory service on their own, or are you rely on additional structures? Is there a possibility to cooperate with national SME organizations to merge these two products to make a match out of it? What is your experience?
I might jump in there. Thanks, Gerhard, and good to see you again. Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to that. So first of all, in the case of SBCI, we're separate from the National Grant Awarding Authority, who are also the authority that advise on technical matters for SMEs. But given how small Ireland is, we work very, very closely with them. one of the biggest value adds I would see that they provide for SMEs currently is they provide a voucher scheme that enables an SME to have a full energy audit, and the output of which is a roadmap as towards what investments they can undertake. And that deals with the phase in the likely cost of that as well. So I think that's a really key part in helping SMEs understand what they can do. While we don't have that advisory aspect in the house, there is a lot of cooperation again between ourselves and the Grant Awarding Authority, but also with the government department, the ministry responsible for this. So we do have online tools that signpost and link directly to our scheme, that link to the other supports that are available for SMEs. But I would say, in terms of all the challenges, the demand side challenge is one of the most, we're finding one of the most difficult. And I think around that fragmented nature of SMEs, the different sectors requiring different technical solutions as well, means that absolutely that advisory part is core. And we do work with representative bodies. While we might go into one general SME representative bodies, we actually work with sector specific ones. And that's a crucial part, to get the feedback from them into what it is that they feel that their members need. And then we try and reflect that. And it's a pain point I only mentioned very briefly in my presentation earlier, though, is the likes of eligible costs versus ineligible costs, and what is needed for different technologies for different sectors. And it's just not one simple solution for them all.
If I may, I can answer on my side. I fully agree with what you said, Gerard. It's non-financial support. We see that as a key issue for engaging companies on that journey. At this point, I briefly mentioned several of those initiatives we have launched. We are piloting that. We are increasing those who work. We are stopping some if they do not work. At this point, they are not linked to our financial support. It's distinct, and the idea is to bring by giving knowledge and advise the company on the willingness to make an investment and to implement a green project. Maybe in the future we may link some advisory services with funding or investment. Don't know yet. On the last point you mentioned regarding the partnership with stakeholders like professional organization, we are very interested by that. We have started to do that with our sister agency called ADEME, which is the French Environment Agency. And we have a joint project for delivering a green accelerator for a cohort of, I think, 20 or 30 companies. So this is a starting point, but really happy to discuss with other partners in France on that topic.
Although maybe less relevant to your question, Gerard, I just also wanted to mention that given the gaps or the skill gaps, or again, the lack of harmonization in terms of the understanding of impact in the fund manager industry, we also have, advisory activities foreseen under InvestEU, basically to help fund managers understand, how they need to embed impact assessment, in their evaluation processes, how impact should be measured, how they can, fulfill the reporting and disclosure obligations under SFDR. So there really is an education also at the fund manager level that we hope will also then, trickle down to the SMEs and help the overall ecosystem, in this green transition.
Thanks, Dorothy.
Thanks. Miriam, you have your hand up?
Yes, actually, I had a question. As Adelaide was just saying, referring to the importance of assessing impact and measuring impact. Of course, that is something you were mentioning in the context of the equity and VC, arena. But I was wondering for the other two speakers, Christian and Shane, what kind of, how are you, verifying the eligibility? Is there, what kind of documentation? Is there something required to show that the funds are being used to finance the investments that they were intended for? Thank you.
Thanks, Miriam. I suppose that I mentioned earlier around there's a database in Ireland of energy efficient assets that is maintained by our tax authority, for which it's the same register that the tax authority use for accelerated capital allowances. So while it's not perfect, it does include most assets that we would be looking to finance in terms of equipment. There's probably always a little bit of a lag, but that database is maintained by the Energy Authority of Ireland. So we're happy that that gives a bona fides. However, the eligibility check is ex ante. It's at the prior to loan drawdown. And given the loan sizes in this, we don't have a separate check afterwards. However, a customer has to have come in with an invoice for a piece of equipment. So it is a little bit more straightforward than perhaps an investment in a bricks and mortar kind of retrofit or fabric of a building, one that might require a post-works EPC check.
On the side, I think eligibility check ex ante and for ex post follow-up is depending on the product. We have some, for instance, if you consider we have some program for R&D funding, which are backed by regulation related to environment at EU level. So there are strict rules for making this funding compliant, including ex post analysis. In other cases, it's maybe only ex ante. We have tried to simplify the path for the companies to make it work in a simple way and facilitate the access, but also staying aligned with the policy objective of the measure. Last point I have in mind in relation to this discussion is the European regulation for sustainable finance, which gives us a framework for increasing the investment in green assets. So we are also trying to incorporate that progressively as the taxonomy is deploying in France and in other countries.
Okay, so are there any more questions from the audience? If not, yeah, we have one more. Marco.
Yeah, just one last maybe. One again is a bit general in the sense that I see that there is a lot of focus on energy efficiency, which of course is very priority. So I was wondering also how much there is a focus in your programs and instruments also on other aspects of sustainability, such as biodiversity or like circular economy, the implementation of circular economy at the company level. So that is a first question. The second one, maybe it's a bit difficult maybe, but I was wondering if there is any effort to essentially streamline green finance in the banking system, for example, by giving better guarantee conditions, for example, for companies which show better energy efficiency than the industry average. So not just looking at companies which are implementing green products, but just a normal company which is doing this business, getting better loan conditions or guarantee conditions if they show that they have, for example, energy efficiency which is below the industry average. Thank you. And I think it's can be for any of you really.
Okay, I might jump in there. So Marco, yeah, there's supposed to be a couple of points to that on the kind of circular economy or going towards sustainability above and beyond the simple energy efficiency. Absolutely, that's coming. We intend to be implementing partners under InvestEU as well, and hope to be able to avail of guarantee capacity there around sustainability. A point I was very much trying to bring out is that there is a market failure, certainly in Ireland, on this. We need to create the market, and it is bit by bit. And this simple, narrow focus on energy efficiency is probably the easiest way to kick that off for something beyond the built environment. And that brings me on to my second point then, is there a benefit to SMEs that can show their bona fides in this area? As it currently stands in the banking market in Ireland, the only benefits are for those that are related to buildings, where somebody can show a better energy rating on the building. I don't think lenders are far enough down the experience curve yet to be able to assess businesses, particularly in SMEs, which are, I talk about our loan schemes, an average loan size in the 40,000 odd euro. Lenders moving towards auto decisioning, moving towards digital first, online only. Those kind of extra checks aren't in place at that kind of loan level.
And if I may, just a comment on the green guarantee issue. This to really deliver a guarantee whose terms are linked to the green content of each investment is something we really want to do. This is one project I mentioned, and we are working on that since I think 1 year. We have not yet finished the design because it's, for us, it's a bit complex. There are several parameters, of course, the resources to launch the program, but also some the way it will work with the commercial banks. It has to be simple enough, but enabling to make the necessary eligibility check, sometimes including monitoring also the real investment made. So we prefer to take our time to deliver something that will work than to be too fast. But I really share your point on that. We think it would be something very useful, and we will do that, but not yet ready.
Just on my side, I mean, we're obviously, striving to finance innovation and company development and growth across, key strategic areas for climate environment, whether it be the circular economy, energy technologies, a sustainable agri-food system, and of course also providing private equity financing through the funds that we back to companies that are focused on more traditional business activities, but that want to undertake that green transition and lower their carbon footprint. What I can say, of course, is again, we have, I would say, specifically earmarked resources to back climate and environmental funds, so sustainability funds. In certain circumstances, we also have distinctive features under our mandates that allow us to go above certain thresholds in terms of our participation in these funds to really allow them to take off. So, generally speaking, we're limited to 50% of a fund, but in circumstances for these funds, we can even go above that threshold. Our investment tickets can be quite significant. And again, when we look at any fund proposal, we really try to determine how it is addressing market failures and gaps, what it can add to the ecosystem, and how we can be long-term partners to these teams, many of which are new and emerging and really benefit not only from our capital, but our experience and expertise in the market.
Well, so we're just about out of time, and I would like to thank the audience for staying tuned and all the speakers once again for their presentations and insights. Next, I will hand over the floor to Miriam Corinne, who is the Senior Counselor on SMEs at the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and City, to provide a wrap-up and the next steps. Back to you, Miriam.
Thanks, Justin. And I too would like to thank all the speakers and also the active audience members. I think we had a very rich discussion today, and it's hard to sum up with all the information that we received, but I would just like to highlight maybe a few key takeaways that I had from the discussion. The first one is that I think the importance of the business case for the investment by the small company has been highlighted. We have to make it interesting to create the market, as Shane was saying. So this can be done by aligning the conditions of the financing with the payback period of the actual green investment, which is sometimes longer than what a regular loan maturity would be. It can also be done through advantageous interest rates. So the importance of the business case is the first thing that I would highlight after today's discussion. we heard that a range of instruments can be used. So anything from grants, repayable advances, loans, loan guarantees, equity, export finance. And just from these three institutions we heard today, we already heard about a lot of different instruments that can be used. These can be new products, or they could also be traditional products that have been adapted or redirected towards specific firms or specific uses of funds. We heard also that it's important to perhaps differentiate products for different types of SMEs. We heard this from Christian, where they target three different kinds of firms, those that are SMEs seeking to green their operations, renewable energy companies, and green tech. So we know that SMEs are in very different places on their journey and probably need, well adapted and tailored products. An important message that came through for me was about the demand side. Very important. This has been something that we've heard in all of the webinars to date. The demand side of the issue needs to be addressed, and we heard about some ways of doing so through advisory services. Of course, policy has a very important role to play, and it's extremely important also to strengthen the whole ecosystem with governments at different levels, so at national, regional level, with financial institutions. We heard about the importance of developing partnerships, including maybe some we wouldn't always imagine. I just recall what Shane was mentioning about the products for homeowners, where actually that can provide capacity building for SME contractors. So it's about really bringing together the different actors. We also heard this from Adelaide's presentation about the need to strengthen and enhance the ecosystem for venture capital and private equity. Another point was that we need to track the impact of the investments. This is something that's becoming more and more in demand, specifically in the equity space, but probably increasingly also in the credit space. That was a bit in response to the question I asked earlier about the eligibility checks. But with that increased need to track the impact, we need to consider the burden of reporting both for the financial institutions and for SMEs. And this sort of suggests that maybe there's a need for more harmonization, perhaps coordination among financial institutions, agreement on what type of information might be required from SMEs. And my last point is that obviously this is a rapidly evolving field. As we heard from the speakers just a moment ago, that certainly there will be new products in the future, an adaptation of the instruments that are currently on offer. And of course, we at the OECD, through the platform, will continue to monitor these developments. So what's next? What's next for the platform? So maybe I could just highlight a few upcoming events and projects. Right now, we're in the process of developing a survey for financial institutions with the aim of better understanding their approaches to sustainability and having some comparable information from different financial institutions. And this will include also questions about what kind of instruments are being used. So that's something that links with today's discussion, and we will be sure to keep you informed about the progress with that survey. We have a few upcoming events. The next webinar, the last one of this year, will take place in November on the margins of the COP27. The likely focus will be on the importance and the role of partnerships in enhancing financing SMEs for sustainability. This is something we heard about today, and so we hope to welcome all of you at the next webinar. And then on the 7th of December, we will have an annual conference of the platform in Paris at the OECD Conference Center that will sort of take stock of the key issues that have emerged over the last year, and we'll have a range of stakeholders involved, and we'll be sure to share information on the planning of that conference. Please mark your calendars. And finally, the platform continues to engage with additional institutions. We're still welcoming new members, and so if your institution is interested in joining please do get in touch with us. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone once again and wish you all a great afternoon or evening. Thank you.